Scott, super excited to be talking with you right now. And for anyone who doesn't really know you, I'd love if you could just start by sharing a little bit of your own entrepreneurial and investing background that led to you building this incredible community and social media presence to share insights with other founders, executives, and investors that you've built out today.
I would love to. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on. And also, just hats off to you for building such an incredible community that's just supporting entrepreneurs. I know, listen, you're doing really good work. A lot of what I try and do with my show as well and with my podcast, Success Story, is just teach people that are trying to figure out how to build. I love working with builders. I love working with entrepreneurs. As you know, they're just a fun group of people to build with and to create content for and to just be around. So, hats off to everything you're doing with Liberty Ventures because it's just amazing. And I'm sure you're going to, have some incredible wins and success stories from not only your community, but the companies you're investing in. I'm really excited to see, where Liberty Ventures is going to be in the next 5 years. But um, back to me. So my background did not start entrepreneurial. I didn't have entrepreneurial parents. I just had one thing I've been very fortunate to have over my life and my career is the ability to look into the future, very similar to how you've built a community sort of before you needed it, but the ability to look into the future and figure out, okay, where if I'm on the path that I'm on right now, if I'm doing the things that I'm doing right now, where am I going to end up? And it seems like such a obvious way to think about your career and your life, but I don't think a lot of people actually understand if I take this job, where am I going to end up? If I build this company, where am I going to end up? And from a very early age, I understood that if I emulated the path that my parents had taken in their own careers, and there was nothing wrong with their careers, they were very successful in their own right, but I would not have the same quality of life as what they achieved. Because my dad worked for the government most of his life. He bought his first house cash at 20, 25, something like that. Just absolutely absurd. That doesn't exist anymore, detached home cash at that age. So I realized very early on that, listen, life is changing. Uh, the ways that we work and the ways that we create wealth is changing. What it really requires to succeed in the world is changing, very different than what our parents had experienced. So I thought that the traditional 9 to 5 way that most of our parents sort of grew up and created their careers, that traditional 9 to 5 was not as safe as a lot of as what we would be led to believe, right? It just you know, high school, college, getting that 9 to 5 job. Um, I just felt like that was actually the least safe path because, as we saw during COVID, if you only bet on one career, if you only bet on one option and you get laid off, you don't have a backup. And I guess I had this idea very early on in my life that I wanted to take more risk. I wanted to take more chance. I wanted to do things a little bit differently than my parents and just see how it played out. See if this was like the new way of building a career. And it started off in tech. I was successful there. And through working in tech companies, I saw one that was acquired, and that was my first like sort of exposure to entrepreneurship and investment and exit and acquisition. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So if I own something or I own a piece of it, then that can create a significant amount of wealth, like life changing wealth. So then I started pursuing, okay, how do I work in startups? How do I there was a period of time where I was consulting. How do I, trade consulting hours for equity in startups? And that was really my graduation from working 9 to 5 W-2 to trying to take equity positions in companies to eventually building a company that was acquired and also still building companies every single day, investing in companies I consider my own brand, my own podcast, a company that I built from scratch that I own 100% of. So it was just traditional. It was moving away from the traditional 9 to 5 and moving towards ownership and leverage. That's the the Cole's notes of my career journey. And I think that even with the podcast, I mentioned that I was very fortunate to always sort of have the ability to look 5 steps ahead and figure out if what I was working on that day was going to be beneficial to me in the future. Um, the podcast was also a way to future proof myself. So I started the podcast when I was building a company that was eventually acquired. How the transaction took place, the company that acquired us was a broadcast software company. We were acquired by a big broadcast hardware company called Grass Valley. But how the transaction actually took place is they approached us and negotiated with us about a year before the acquisition actually happened, so that they could test out our product and sell our product to their customer base to just see if there was a fit. So I knew that the exit was coming. Like, it was there was it wasn't like it wasn't like, oh, let's shop it around, let's see if we get some, like, no, like, we knew who we were going to be sold to, we knew who was going to acquire us, we knew that it was coming. And when you sort of have that when you have sort of the future of the company laid out like that, you also realize, okay, well, what am I going to do after this? So it was a decent exit, but it's not like an fu money never work again exit. So you're like, okay, what's next in my career? And for a lot of founders that have an exit, or even somebody that's working for a company that's acquired, they don't really have a game plan for after it's acquired. They're not thinking that far into the future. I was. And I realized that if I wanted to do anything in the future, it would help if more people knew my name. It would help if I had a little bit of an audience. It would help if I had a little bit of a little bit more presence online. And that's when I started the podcast. So I started the podcast while I was still building a company that would eventually get acquired, in hopes that building this podcast and building this audience and building this community would make whatever I decided to do in the future a little bit easier. So whether or not I wanted to start something new, I wanted to go work for a company, I wanted to do consulting, coaching, it doesn't really matter what I wanted to do in the future after this acquisition. I just wanted it to be a little bit easier, because I was studying from the greats like the Gary V's of the world, who built a massive audience and were launching companies against that audience with very little friction. So VaynerMedia, Vayner Sports, Empathy Wines, NFT Project, these are all Gary V's companies that he launched against his audience because he had it. It was there. They already knew who he was. So I'm like, I got to start building that audience now. So whatever I do in the future, they're going to be there. They're going to trust me. I'm going to have a much easier time with the next stage of my career and my life if that audience exists. And that's where the podcast came from. And that's what I've been doing for the past 6.5 years. And this is one of the 4 types of leverage that I'm building and that you're building with this show as well. If you go to this Naval Ravikant tweet thread about the 4 kinds of leverage that basically anybody who wants to be successful needs to learn how to use. There's financial leverage, there's technical leverage like software, there's human leverage, so human capital, and also there's media leverage. These are the 4 kinds of leverage that at some point every single business in the world will have to figure out how to use properly to scale and to be successful. And in my mind, I'm like, let me just start building one of those 4 kinds of leverage so that I have it when I need it. And that was sort of the future proofing of myself. And that's why I started the podcast.
So I love that you're emphasizing something for founders that too many of them don't pay attention to if they're just getting started, which is to think long term.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tough area to go into, to start a company or to give yourself options, and it takes a while to build up. And I think that's really important to emphasize to everyone. But you just touched on the community building side of what you're doing, and
Yeah.
I'd love for you to double click into that and why that's so important, and how you've been building that out, because it's easy to think that a podcast is just about putting something out into the world and you've got an audience who are just
Mm-hmm.
listening to you. But I know that you really think about actually building out the community. So how have you thought about doing that, leveraging a podcast for that, and why that's important for other opportunities in the future?
Sure. And I want to touch on one thing that you said as well. I'm talking about future proofing myself as an individual with my podcast, and so that more people know me, so that in the future, whenever I want to build something, I'm going to have this audience that I can tap into. For a founder, very important. I think that's incredibly important, because you can make an argument for, the celebrity CEO. You can make an argument for building in public. You can make an argument for how attaching yourself to like sort of like how do I say this, as the founder, um, uh, building a very strong personal brand is only going to help the company, because people trust people. They don't trust brands. They trust people. And as the founder, I do think you should build out a personal brand, whether or not it's a podcast or a variety of other ways that you can connect with your audience. But also just in terms of, uh, you know, thinking about the future and thinking about where you're going as a founder, it's not just about building out a personal brand for your company or for the next one or the one after that. You also have to think about, like, what am I building this company for? Do I want to have this cash flowing company? Do I want to have an exit? Do I want to IPO? Do I want to sell to private equity? Do I want to raise capital? Like what? Like there's so many different paths that you can take, and I'm not saying that you have to have it all figured out, but I think that too many founders, obviously first time founders more than any other kind of founder, they just start building because they're passionate about something and they don't really know where they're going with it. So knowing where you're going in life is the X factor to success, to happiness, to fulfillment. Because whether or not you're building a personal brand that's going to help your current company and the next one, whether or not you're building a company and you want to raise VC money or you don't, you want to bootstrap it, all of the options are available to you. All the options can work, but you just have to put some thought into it. Like understand why you're doing this thing, because if you don't, it may turn into something that you don't want it to turn into. That's the best advice I can give you. So just be purposeful with how you architect your life, your brand, your company. Be purposeful with all of it, because then it will actually end up where you want it to go, as opposed to it just ending up like sort of almost ad hoc building something without much direction. And I think that that's when you have these horrible stories of like founder burnout, or I built myself a job that I don't even want, or I raised money from the wrong VCs, or I built this company for my kids, but they don't want anything to do with it. And then how do I get out of it now? Like there's so many uh, uh, very sad outcomes to entrepreneurship that could have been avoided if you were just a little bit more thoughtful and purposeful when you first start building. So first time founders, especially, just put some thought into where you want this thing to go. Put some thought into everything. Just don't do anything uh, without the care that it deserves. But to answer your question more specifically about community, so if we're talking about building an audience, that's great. It's sort of one way. It's sort of me speaking at the audience, and hopefully they get some value from it. But when you think about community, you're not just speaking at somebody, you're now actively bringing them into the conversation. So you're creating something of value that they benefit from, but you're also you're almost co-creating value with your community member. So there's a variety of different ways to do this, but I think that all creators, all people building personal brands, all businesses putting out content, they should co-create with the audience. So whether or not that's a Slack or Discord or Facebook group, or I'm in like 5 different WhatsApp groups, it's about co-creation. It's about creating valuable content, but then bringing in people to contribute, to ask questions, to help each other, to create something that is far beyond just content creation and audience building. And I think that if you really want to get the most bang for your buck, for lack of a better term, out of the content you create and the audience that you build, it's to create a community of like-minded individuals that can support each other, so that you're not the only person creating content, you're not the only person teaching. They're all mission aligned. They're all trying to focus on the same thing. Maybe it's a community of entrepreneurs, whatever, maybe it's a community of investors, but you create the content that brings them together, that galvanizes them, and then you create a space for them to support each other. And when you do that, not only are you giving them way more value than just creating content, you're creating this community of people that they're not going anywhere. They are it's a very sticky way to build a community. It's a very sticky way to create content that resonates, because think about if I'm just doing a podcast and I don't give people a space to land, meaning I could have my podcast, but if I have my podcast and I talk about entrepreneurship and I say, hey, I created a Slack channel where you can ask all your entrepreneur questions or your startup questions, and this Slack channel is full of a whole bunch of other entrepreneurs, and I just use the podcast as a funnel into my community, whoever joins that community, they're not going anywhere. So they're still going to consume all your content. They're going to be more engaged with your content. They're almost going to develop like a more intimate relationship with you as a content creator, and they're getting way more value because now they have a whole bunch of peers that they can bounce ideas off of. If I just put out content into the world, if I just have Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and I don't create a community for people to join, then I mean it's very easy for them to go to the next creator, or for them to find the next piece of content or the next podcast that they like a little bit better, because there's, outside of the information, there's no additional value. There's no other relationship built. So creating community, it's not easy, but it's not exceptionally hard either. I think that really it's just about understanding who your audience is. It's about giving them a space to congregate, and then supporting. And when you do that, you encourage them to support each other in some shared goal or shared problem that they're all dealing with, and that is a very powerful thing to build. There's obviously ways to monetize community as well. There's ways to sell products into a community from a commercial perspective, but forget commercials. I would just say just doing it as a content creator, just so that people stick around and people get a little bit more attached to what you're doing. I think it's a very powerful tool, and I think that the future of content creators should be focused on community building, because it's very easy to lose an audience member if you give them nothing except the content. So that's where community building creates that stickiness.
There's so much to unpack here, Scott. I wish we had more time, but let me do one more question before I let you go. So, in building out this community and running your podcast for 6.5 years, what is the number one thing that you've taken away from talking with so many incredible business leaders?
There's a lot. I mean, the general ideas that are sort of key to success would be, find a way to stay in the game for an unreasonable amount of time. It doesn't matter what you're building. If you find a way to just outlast everyone else, you're going to find a way to become successful. Um, Reverse engineer success. So if you are trying to build something, you don't have to reinvent the playbook. Look at who's done it before, and then reverse engineer whatever strategy or tactic. It could be, and reverse engineer everything. I truly mean that. Like, people start and they try all these crazy ideas to find their first 50 customers. If you go on YouTube, you can find 100 entrepreneurs that spoke about how they secured their first 50 customers. For investors, if you are an operator or an entrepreneur, you made some money, now you want to become an investor, more often than not, you start throwing money at projects, they don't work out, you lose a lot of money, and that's the way that you learn how to become an investor. I understand that, that's the norm for the majority of first time investors, but I'm just saying, like, why don't you spend a little bit of time reverse engineering how other successful investors have found a way to 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 basically not fail, basically to not to actually be successful. I just feel like all the information is out there, and for some reason our own egos stop us from learning. And I think that if we just put the ego aside, look at somebody that's already accomplished whatever we wanted to accomplish, with all the podcasts and the books and the YouTube videos out there, there's not really a single question that most people that are listening to this podcast are asking that haven't been solved 1,000 times. And reverse engineer, whether or not they'll explicitly tell you how to do it, or whether or not you study someone and then you reverse engineer that way. I just feel like that is such a hack that most people should take advantage of, because the information's out there. You want to build a big podcast, you listen to enough of my interviews, or people interview me, you're going to get pretty much 90% of the stuff that I do and that I have done over the past 6 years to build a podcast. You want to have a great investment portfolio, you listen to some great investors, you're gonna avoid a lot of the mistakes they made, and probably have a pretty good chance of success with your first foray into investing. Same when you're building a new company. So I would say, if you combine the ideas of reverse engineering success plus staying in the game for an unreasonable amount of time, those are probably two of the most important ideas that will lead to, I would say, like a 95+% success rate. And I know we're sort of coming up on time, but I have one more really important idea that I just want to drop here for the audience. Out of every single person that I've interviewed, and I've interviewed people that are billionaires, people that have sold companies for 9 figures, people that are serial entrepreneurs, even people that have had incredible success, not financially, but Olympic athletes, whatever the measure of success is. Outside of those two ideas, I think the third most important idea is the ability for you to bet on yourself repeatedly. The ability for you to just understand that you can do anything that you want to do, and that nobody who's achieved anything significant is that much different or any kind of special. They just have stuck with it for that unreasonable amount of time, learn from people who've done it before, and continue to execute. When you There's a really great Mark Andreessen quote, and you'll appreciate this. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't know it exactly, but basically the quote is, uh, if you commit enough of yourself, your time, and your energy to any specific task, any specific business that you want to build, you will start to find that the world is very malleable. The world bends to your will if you put enough time and energy and attention towards something. It's just that most people do not put enough time, energy, and attention towards the things they want to do. But when you start to really, really, really put your all into whatever it is you'd like to build, the world starts to bend to your will. And the only way that you will ever put enough time, energy, attention towards a project, a business, an idea is if you truly bet on yourself and you give it your all. It sounds cliche. It is so true. If anybody's listening to this and they want to do quite literally anything, build a podcast, start a business, build a giant investment portfolio, bet on yourself, reverse engineer success, and do that thing for the next 50 years, and there isn't a chance that you won't be successful at it. It's as simple as that.
Scott, that is such a powerful way for us to end. I am so appreciative of the community that you've built and that you're a part of the Liberty Ventures community. Thank you so much for
Likewise.
this.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate you.